Welcome to Only Human, where I talk about human behavior and psychology from a layperson point of view, just kind of things that I've noticed over time. One thing that I have noticed about human behavior is that it seems that we are more emotional than rational. I kind of think of it in terms of like a gas gauge in your car where you have E and F. I think of it like E and R. It seems like the more emotional we become, the closer to the E we get, the further away from the R, and vice versa. I don't say this to kind of crap all over emotions. I believe they're an important part of human nature, and we have them for reasons. But I just noticed that when our emotions are engaged, it seems we become less rational. Also, it seems that we are mostly driven by our instincts, emotions, and our environment. So when I talk about environment, I'm talking about what I call our immediate environment and our extended environment. By immediate environment, I'm talking about like the people that mostly in our formative years, wherever we grew up, the people around us, our family, friends, and all the people in our neighborhood, in our city, and all the different cultures and ways of thinking that go along with these dynamics. And then when I talk about extended environment, I'm talking about things and people we see on TV and on the internet. And sometimes we can kind of associate ourselves with groups that we only really involve ourselves with online or through people and pundits on TV. I used to think we considered available information and data and use it to form our opinions and our beliefs. But it seems that it's kind of guided by other things. So what kind of started me on this journey is like I've always kind of had interest in things like this, but like human and animal behavior has always kind of fascinated me. But in the early 2010s, I started to watch more and more YouTube. Like I grew up watching TV. I always had the TV on. Whether I was watching it or in the background, it was always on. But then after a while, I started to get on to YouTube, and I started to watch more and more content creators. And then the TV would be left off more and more. And when that happened, I started to really hear people talk about what it is that they think and what they believe and their opinions. And then I would read the comment sections, and it was very interesting because we would talk to people that we know, people that were close to us, and then we hear people on TV talking, but you didn't really get to hear in depth what their ideas and were and how they arrived at those conclusions and opinions. But you would get that online, and you would see people's comments in the comment section, and as well on social media like Facebook and Instagram, things like that. You would see these discussions, and a lot of things started to become clear to me. Like, one is that what we think is normal, the things that we're interested in, come mostly from our environment. It seems like I don't follow sports. I have no interest in sports for the most part. I did watch poker for a while on television. That was while I was playing poker. And then maybe 10 years ago, I kind of stopped playing, and then I stopped watching it. I had no interest in watching it afterwards. It's like if I'm not playing these games, I don't really care to watch. But people think that it's a normal thing to watch sports. And I'm not saying it isn't, but people ask questions like, "What's your so and so team?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't have a team." People think that's kind of odd, especially as a male, if you don't really follow sports. But then sometimes, if they went that route, I would kind of ask them, "Well, who won the last two World Cups?" And I'm talking to Americans. A lot of times they didn't know. So it's interesting to me because they think it's a normal thing for Americans, particularly males, to watch sports, but they didn't seem to know what was going on in the most popular sport in the world. Why is that? Because they didn't watch that particular sport in their environment. Things are going to come down to what it is we do in our environment. You think about what things people like to eat. You go to different parts of the world, and you hear that we like to eat these kind of things. We don't like these kind of things. And it's just going to come down to the things that we learned coming up in our early years. These are the things that we kind of feel make sense. We kind of feel that these are the way things should be after a while. As a matter of fact, like for instance, talking to Americans about things like tipping, it really makes no logical sense the way we tip in America. And I'll never forget having a discussion in a comment section with a woman about tipping and how I was saying it doesn't really make sense. And I never forget she said, well, something to the effect of, I guess you never really worked for tips. And like, she couldn't have been more wrong. Like most of my adult life is in an industry where the majority of my income, if not a large amount of it, was based on tips. But that didn't factor into my opinion on tipping and how it works. It was her, she seemed to be affected by the fact that she benefited from getting tips. So that completely skewed her opinion on it. Also, I think that combined with the fact that she came up in an environment where this is just normal, the way we do it, that she would argue for it and not really considering any other way of looking at it. It was just, it seemed like purely emotional. Also, I would notice when I would watch content creators, some of the things that they would say, like after a while, you would get to learn their biases and their slants and how they would kind of move goalposts and change things around to make things kind of fit into their worldview. I think of it in terms of like a little box that we keep in front of us. And in front of that box is a lens. And this is what I refer to as emotional lensing. That box is what I call our worldview. So when we have incoming data and information, very good, I feel that it kind of refracts, kind of like light going through a lens, and it changes its trajectory and goes down into our box, our worldview box. And when things hit our emotional lens, I think we just kind of, no matter what direction is going on, we change it so that it can fit right into our box. Whether or not the thought process from A to B is rational or not, we'll try to make it fit one way or another. So I would see content creators say things sometimes that I may or may not agree with. But when I look in the comment section, it seemed that the people who were fans of this content creator, or who watched them and followed them, would always seem to almost always seem to agree with whatever it was the person was saying. And also when they would have debates online, like you would have two creators or two content creators speaking to another one or someone on the phone, and if there was a disagreement, the people in the comment section would always, it seemed like that their opinion would be based on how they feel about the people, and in some cases how they feel about the topic. In the case where we had two different content creators, the people who were fans of one somehow always seem to take that person's side, and other people who are fans of the other content creator, if they were in a disagreement, they always kind of, fans would say that the other person was dead wrong and stupid, and the person that they follow is right on. Somehow their person destroyed the other person all the time. And how is that even possible? The reason is because we don't even really consider the information and the data and what people say and do. What we really go by is how we feel about the individuals involved. I mean, just considering things like drinking coffee. In America, people think it's normal to drink coffee. I'm not really a coffee guy. I don't really get it. But it amazes me when I see the lines at Starbucks for this overpriced coffee. I don't really understand it, but it's like people just kind of do what they see other people doing. And I'm not saying these things to down humans. I'm the same way. I'm human. But I'm just saying I've become more aware of this behavior and what drives it. But, and people will get to the point where they feel like when you get up in the morning, you just have coffee. They refer to it as my coffee. My coffee. I've had my cup of coffee. I need to go get my coffee. And it's just like a regular thing. But if you didn't learn that coming up, seeing other people doing it, you probably wouldn't do it. Like in England, I understand they drink tea. Coffee's not as big there, but tea is a thing. Here, we may drink tea, but it's not as big. It's going to come down to our environment, things that we've learned in our environment. We just kind of mimic these things. And that also influences how we speak. Like I've learned, I come to understand that that's what an accent is. Why do we speak differently in different regions of the world or different regions of the same country? It's really mimicry, and we have an extremely good talent at mimicry. I'm screwing that word up, but what an accent is us. That's also how we learn language in the first place. We hear people use words and we hear the context in which those words are used, and that's how we learn language. But also we learn how to speak. So we not only learn words, but we learn how to pronounce them, and that's how we form accents. It's mimicry, and that just seems like the normal way to speak. Like the whatever slang terms they use and how they speak, it just becomes normal to us. And people from other regions, when we hear them, we consider that an accent, and it sounds kind of interesting or weird to us. But also, I realized that listening to Americans discuss things like politics and religion, I realized that these are. It's known that these are things that we emotionally connect with for whatever reason. We have a stronger connection to these things emotionally. So it seems like these discussions become more and more irrational. It seems like the more emotionally dug in you are, the less rational we become. Like that gauge closer to the E, further away from the R. Um, I like to think of the overview, taking the unemotional overview, like the classic line of "can't see the forest for the trees," obviously meaning you like if you were to suddenly wake up and you look up and you see a bunch of trees, this kind of blocking your view. You can't see very far past these trees, but you can see that there are trees here, but you don't know that you're in a forest because you can't see very far because these trees are blocking your view. But if you were to somehow be able to rise up above the canopy, you can look down and see, oh shit, I'm in a forest, and it extends 20 miles this way, 30 miles in this direction. Well, I can go this direction about 2 miles and I could be out of this thing. But you have to be able to take yourself out of the situation and take an overview in order to actually see what's going on. Like I don't. I'll talk about this more in another video, but I have it. I think that the left-right dynamic is one of America's biggest problems. It makes us a lot more irrational, and it causes huge problems unnecessarily. But I don't subscribe to either side. I think it's kind of ridiculous, and I can form a lot of parallels between that and gang culture. But more on that later. But not being dug in on either side, I can kind of take the overview and actually, I can see that people on both sides are being completely irrational. They're not even actually considering incoming data information. And when it comes to people like people that are running for office, we don't actually consider the person's qualifications or their character. What we think of more first is, things like what side are they on? Same thing with world affairs when something's going on in the world, or when it comes to things like nationalism, and same thing with religion. What did we come up in? If you come up in an area where most people are Muslim, there's a good chance you will be Muslim, unless something changes in your extended environment later on in life. We kind of default to what was happening in our culture, in our environment, our immediate environment when we were growing up. But like, for instance, when I was talking to people about the dropping of not one but two atomic bombs on Japan, it had to be one of the most horrific acts ever committed by man. But Americans don't seem to think of it that way. They say they saved American lives, which is utterly ridiculous and kind of offensive. Like we incinerated like hundreds of thousands of people, not we, excuse me, I didn't do it, you didn't do it, but hundreds of thousands of lives were lost. People were incinerated to thousands degrees Fahrenheit at the epicenter. People were instantly incinerated. You had moms getting their children ready for school. Maybe kids were on their way to school. The dad doing whatever he does, getting ready for work. This is just kind of U.S. thinking. But there were citizens, just regular people who didn't have anything to do with the heads of these countries who were at odds with each other. And they were incinerated. And somehow we don't look at that as it's like one of the worst acts committed by man. And we say that it saved American lives. That's absolutely insanity to me. But that's how our emotions kind of funnel things into our box of a worldview. We will make sense out of things, even if it leads us down a completely irrational tunnel. But I think how we form our opinions and what we think makes sense and what is right and wrong is going to come down to the things that we learn from our environment and how we feel about the people, places, ideas that are involved. It's ultimately was going to be how we look at things and how we draw conclusions to form our opinions. I think it's mostly our emotions at work. And again, the more emotionally dug in we are, the less rational we'll become. These are things that, of course, I could be wrong. This is just my opinion. This is things that I have noticed by watching people. And I feel the only way to actually see what's really going on and draw rational conclusions is take the unemotional overview, take yourself out of the situation so that you can actually see what's going on and draw a conclusion and come up with your own opinion. But anyway, thanks for listening. More on this later. See you next time.